Hi, I'm Empress Rose, and this is Death. So, not as scary as it sounds, and everything I've read and everything I understand, it is not used to predict actual death. It is more or less known as the transformation card, and in fact, the good tarot just labels it transformation. Just forget the big scary death label. Let's talk transformation. So, but I think death really connotates the inevitability of this transformation and the sense that you can either go through the transformation willingly or you can go through it kicking and screaming, which would be our devil card. So, transformation, portal, renewal, surrender. So in the Rider-Waite deck, we have this rose here on the flag. This is the flag of life. Death is actually on the side of life. It's here to make room for new life, for actual life. We move from theoretical ideas into actual life, and we have to make room for reality. It's not just our dream, right? Because we're co-creators. So we're dreaming, certainly, but then reality has a lot of response to that. So here we have, kings, mothers, children, they all bow down to this transformation, to these changes. That's wisdom. That's wise. And those that don't bow down before death pay a pretty hefty price. Here we've got the sun coming up. This is all about actually a new dawn and a new day. But this is about going to sleep so that we can wake up again and be new people and have a new life. So that was a little more further down that trail that I wanted to go. But here we have our Kabbalah Tree of Life. And what we're doing is we're headed towards this tower moment. Everything has to pass through sort of a big shakeup. This is inevitable, this big shakeup here. And we have the Hanged Man. We can either get to big transformation. We don't have to go through the heart. The heart doesn't have to change or transform. We just have a punishment, and we realize, we just understand that that this change is happening. We can have Wheel of Fortune. Again, the heart doesn't have to change with Wheel of Fortune. We can just bypass the whole thing, and whoop, big, huge, wonderful changes happening in our life. We've got death that brings us to the tower moment, a submission. We've got temperance, so things take the time they take, sort of juggling over between two places. And then we've got devil, which is resistance to the transition, to this huge transition coming up in the solar plexus, affecting our sense of self and our place in the world and who we are. So, but here's death between Tiferet, beauty, and Nitzah, victory. So from the heart of the matter, we can be victorious. We can have by submitting to the sort of the changes in the heart and sort of this transition. This always reminds me of a baby twisting and turning in the womb to go through the birth canal. There's a twist, there's a change, there's a transition. And in fact, we'll see in one of these more of that transition metaphor of as far as the cervix, the smallest opening, the inner opening being opened and prepared and dilated at 10 centimeters before, and then we have the true transition into reality. So this is the pre-transition where, we're dilated. That's the cervix, that's the inner heart, that's the inner understanding of it, allowing for the theoretical infant to transform into the actual real infant. And we have to understand that and be open to the reality being different than the vision and the dream. And that's a bit of what this transformation is about. So the death does conjure up all these fears, fears of the unknown. And it's not just the unknown of what happens after we die, it's the new life after death. It's what's it going to be like after this transition. That's what we're afraid of. That's sort of the unknown. It can also be a little bit behind the fears that we can have, and the fears of what is that when you can't, insomnia, right? Of just that resistance, especially a small child feels of falling asleep. It can feel a little bit like death. But you do wake up new every morning, and you get to be a new person if you want every morning. So fear of the unknown, what comes afterwards. But this whole transition is in the service of actual life. This is sort of where the dance, the co-creation, the dance with the universe actually becomes the universe really responding of, well, okay, you wanted this child. The child's not going to be exactly how you imagined it. It's going to be its own thing. But that's the beauty of co-creation. So death being sort of this portal between what something is not and something is becoming. Yeah, irreversible changes, a rite of passage. After this, things won't be the same. You'll see things very differently. The reality, this is submitting, understanding the reality is going to be very different than how you envisioned it. So, and death being a very integral part of life, a very generous part of life. And we'll see that in a lot of different cards. But here, death is carrying the banner of life, and your choices are to submit or be like, succumb less willingly. So, and in the reverse, I often think of death as the devil card, is the refusal to submit. So your image, your ego, your self-image, and I don't mean ego in a bad way, but the original plan, what you thought you were going to create, who you thought you were, this changes and this shifts. And the best way to do it is willingly. So we also have, oh, I did want to talk about, it comes after the Hanged Man, right? So we just did the Hanged Man in number 12, and that's about like having the realizations, having the understanding, having that time out where you start to understand that how little control you have. And this is full submission to the fact that there are parts here that you can't control, that you don't have like a forceful say over. You can say and dream and imagine and go through all these channels that you want, but when the reality emerges, you don't really have a say in it. And so it comes after the Hanged Man, those realizations that the Hanged Man had when everything was paused about what reality was going to be. The thief that's punished for the reactions, his transgressions, he transforms. He realizes, I can't keep doing this. I have to stop what I'm doing. I have to change going forward. In order for me to move forward with my life, in order for me to move forward with my dreams, I can't hold on to doing things the same way. I have to change. So, and then the Devil card, which we'll be seeing later, is the I refuse to change. I can't change. So, and then it comes before Temperance. So the changes that are taking internally will take their time to emerge in reality. So we talk about sort of a transition period in giving birth, where it's once the cervix is fully dilated and it's before the pushing. So the body's all been prepared through this whole process leading up to sort of the Hanged Man. And then you actually have a time called the transition period where there's no contractions, or you know, it's all kind of a wash. But if we're trying very hard to organize what birth is like, there's this transition period where there's no contractions and you kind of get a rest. And that's before you get the contractions that cause you to push. So the cervix is dilated, but it's just going to take this time. And that's what we see in Temperance, this time between when the inner adjustments have been made and then it's time to start pushing that out. So here we have that's Temperance, sort of more or less the transition period. Here we have Death, this like, okay, that we've been prepared and we're ready for this huge transition, this huge change to come in. And then we have the Devil, which is sort of the body resisting the whole process and not wanting to do that inner work. But this is willingness to do the inner work. So so if we want to talk about a seed rather than the more graphic idea of birth, you know, the seed is planted, and this is when all of that potential, all of that planting, the picking out of the seeds, the picking the position of the seeds, the timing of the seeds, of when we plant that, all of that changes. And this is like, okay, now the seed is no longer a seed. Now it's actually going to sprout, but it's going to take some time between that sprouting and when we start to see it emerge into the surface. It's going to take a minute. So this is the Death card, is it's no longer a seed, it's now a sprout. So we can do that willingly, but there's still going to be some time before that actually starts making its way into reality. So an inner adjustment has occurred. Yeah, and if we're talking about a road trip, right, we had sort of stuck in traffic, a shift in the itinerary. And then what we see here, if we're stuck in traffic or we're stuck in a construction zone on our little road trip to Arches National Park, is we start to remember, wait a minute. The whole point of this trip wasn't to get to Arches as fast as possible. It was to spend time with each other and enjoy each other. And we can do that just as well stuck in traffic at 0 miles an hour as we can at 70 miles an hour. So, so this is that realization that the trip wasn't really about the destination. It's more about the trip and the things that we're doing together. So if we're taking that trip with someone, we're starting to realize that, oh, wait, that's right. It wasn't about the destination. It was about doing something together and having an adventure and having this whole adventure. So accepting that you're going to be stuck in traffic sometimes, or in a construction zone or whatever. And then the Devil, the opposite side, would be like refusing to accept that and getting mad. So to resist this being stuck in traffic, to resist that is actually just going to cause pain and suffering. So it's just surrendering, okay, we're stuck in traffic, but you know what? We get to talk more. And you know what? The navigation device can go away, and we don't have to focus so much on navigating stuff as we can just about relating. And so just a shift in perspective of what we're actually doing here and surrendering to the perspective. So it can feel, it is a little bit of ego death. Like, and by ego death, I mean that forceful intention that we can control everything that's happening in our lives, that we can control everything. And that sort of ego death. I think, you know, the ego is very important. It's the Fool card. It's the Magician card. It's that I'm going to create. I can do this. I have what it takes. I have the power. I'm a creative force in the universe. And the Death card is like, oh yes, that's right. I'm a creative co-force. I also have to work with life and work with external circumstances that are outside of my control. So it's sort of, yeah, letting go of how you think it should be. Putting down the map and sort of letting adventure take over. So let's see. In the Golden Tarot, we see really about the gentleness of this transition, about the submission to the transition. We're not fighting death. We're not fighting this transformation. We're not fighting the change in our motivations or in how we feel about a situation or how we're even going to approach a situation. We're not fighting it. So this would be like really very different than the Hanged Man card, where, well, it's the same as in we're like submitting to something, actually. It would be very different from the Strength card. It's similar to the Strength card in that we're using our inner strength, but it's different in that we're not staying the course. We're allowing for the changes that need to happen. We're allowing ourselves to go nice and easy. And there are all these helpers, you know, putting water on the lips. And here we have this lily. We're talking about, this is an understanding in your hand. You can grasp the fact that there's newness coming in here. There's a new way of viewing the trip. There's a new way of viewing this adventure and what you've been wanting to create. There's a new way of viewing it. It's coming in, but first we kind of have to let go of the old vision, let go. And there's just such gentleness to this card. It's this acceptance that change is inevitable. And that you can face your destiny, that you do have that inner strength to face your destiny. And it's just such a beautiful card. I always feel so gentled and relaxed about the transition when I see this card. Yes, something is ending. And you know what? It was meant to end. We weren't meant to rigidly stick with the original plan as is and check off every box and execute as originally planned. We're co-creating with the universe. And I think in the last one I was talking about that, no, it was a personal reading recently about being an artist and how these things come, you know, very few artists like see the vision in their mind, execute it perfectly. There's all sorts of things where the color doesn't turn out the way you want it to. And do you keep forcing that image, or do you work with sort of what happens in this problem-solving mode of here, this isn't working out, but that doesn't make sense with this card, that something's not working out. It means that we're adapting and we're moving and we're co-creating with, we're intending to do this brush stroke and there's a loose hair on it and it ends up over here. Sometimes we do want to cover that up, and sometimes we just want to roll with it and keep going and be more expressionistic about what's actually happening on the canvas and using our image in our head as a guide, but playing with the reality, playing with what's actually coming out and what's actually we're experiencing. So that's sort of a creative, artistic way of living, and this Death card really embodies that, of working more with reality. And not just forcing our image of the world onto it, but working more with reality and adapting and problem solving in the moment. Now we have the Santa Muerte Death card. Obviously, this is the namesake. It's Santa Muerte, Saint Death, Saint Death. And this one is my favorite Death card, and is my favorite card in that deck. Focus is on the new life coming. This card, so sometimes these cards can actually open up other meanings for other cards from other decks. And this is the card that opened up the whole meaning to me of the Death card and helped me really see, you know, sometimes it's just words for a while and you're like, okay, that's what the Death card means. It's a transition. And this one is like a deep understanding. Obviously, like I've had kids, so I really understand on sort of a physical level, this whole picture, what's going on here. She is the doorway between non-being and being. She is bringing a being into it. She is looking forward to this. But what do we have to harvest here? We harvest the pregnant woman, the one become two, like the, we harvest, no, we harvest the pregnant woman, but that sounds really funny. But what's being cut down here is pregnancy. What's emerging is the child. This is what was meant to happen. This is what we intended with the Fool card. This is how we intended this. But she has to make room for what's actually in there. What's actually, who is that? It's not going to be what she imagined. It's not going to be the person she imagined, the person she thought, the person she dreamed of. None of this adventure is going to be the way she exactly thought it was. But it's all very inspired, divinely guided, and this huge transition here, this huge change. And this one, she's definitely looking forward to the new thing. We're actually, and I love it because she's very done with the pregnancy. She's done with being the pregnant person. She's done with that whole situation, with all of that. She's finished and completed that cycle. She doesn't even want to be pregnant anymore. What she wants is the new life, right? So even though the pregnancy ends and she becomes, like, in fact, legally a mother right here. Even though the pregnancy ends, she's not really mourning the pregnancy. She's not really sad that it's over. Even though it's something she very much wanted at the beginning, she's not horrified or sad or regretful that this pregnancy is ending. It's natural. It's normal. It's what needs to happen. So it's a profound transition, and the deck, the booklet that comes with it calls it a true and proper revolution. And this is like a threshold moment. We're not going to go back. We're not going back. She's not going back. We're not stuffing the baby back in, and she's going to continue being pregnant. And to resist this change would cause her so much pain and suffering, both to her and to the new reality that's trying to emerge, right? To resist it would cause suffering. So we have a very willing transition here, very happy transition. She's not going to go back. It's a true and proper revolution. We do not return to who we were before the death card. And we know that, and we understand that. And it's almost an exciting card. And I think this depiction of it really pulls that out, that excitement of a new life coming in, and our focus is more on enjoying that rather than what's being left behind, which was just a dream, just an image. It's okay. That's what started it all. We wanted that. We wanted that for as long as we had that, and that's wonderful. But this is really what we're after. But it does take submission and humility. And to resist that is trauma, loss, and violence. This one is another one, a very gorgeous depiction of death. This is the generosity of death, of what it allows in reality, what it allows to emerge, right? That death of the seed we could mourn. It's no longer a seed. That's so sad. But the whole point of the seed was to grow, was to get up here. So this is just such a beautiful depiction of that generosity that you can feel. Death being in service to life, the ending being in service to beauty, to life, to growth. And that's what its purpose is. Intentionally making way for the new, understanding, wanting the old to be gone, wanting the image to be gone, wanting the ideal to be gone so that the reality can come in and emerge. This always reminds me, we've got the butterfly right here. This always reminds me that the cocoon is, right, and the butterfly is always going to be our symbol of transformation and this transition. But the cocoon is a grave, is a coffin to the caterpillar. It is the womb to the butterfly, right? And it's the same thing, but very different iterations of the same creature, very different process. Not process, but very different ways of moving, very different ways of being. You wouldn't even guess that this was once like a hairy worm, but that's what the death card is that cocoon. It's heading into that cocoon, heading into that transitional, transformational space. And yeah, the caterpillar is no longer. The caterpillar heads into that cocoon, and that's the end of the caterpillar. The caterpillarness ceases to exist. The butterfly emerges. And Ram Dass says, we can't just rip away the caterpillarness and have ourselves a butterfly. There's a whole gentle process. There's a whole process, and it can't be forced. It has to be surrendered to, which we got in this original one, the surrender, the submission. It has to be surrendered to, and it can't be forced. We can't just open up a cocoon and there's your butterfly like it's some kind of egg, but a real fertilized egg, that's not the way too. A real fertilized egg, if you open it from the outside, you kill what's inside. What's inside has to emerge in its own timing, in its own way, and that is the beginning of new life. So this again is talking about that gentleness and you know, the heart and reality, what can emerge from our dreams and from our hopes, and that the reality isn't going to be exactly what we thought it was going to be. So, and then we have I wish she had done a pronunciation guide with this, but I got a new deck for ForHaxa from Cullinane, who I've used before. She has the crow decks, and yeah, some other decks. Anyway, I love this one. This is about, so she has this whole sort of fantasy world, this fairy world, and these stories that emerge. Here we have a fox dying, and as long as that fox continues to hold on to life, it prolongs its own suffering. So here we have the fairy of death sort of gentling, allowing this fox to release its body, to release its spirit, to be released. And in the story she tells, a new fox walks by immediately after, and we understand that this new life, this new fox, has taken the spirit of this old fox here. But as long as that spirit clings to the body, or the body clings to the spirit, as long as we resist this transition, the pain is prolonged and suffering. So this one really talks about that aspect. And then we have with the apparition as well here, we have this really, again, the classic transition, transformation, butterfly here. And here we have the butterfly emerging out of this body. Again, that sense of the spirit releasing something, releasing some sort of constraint that it had on it to go fly free and be what it's meant to be. I mean, it was meant to be a caterpillar too, for as long as it was a caterpillar. But here we sort of see a little bit of strain of slouging off the cocoon and what's no longer needed, and that protective space that's no longer needed, and the growth really emerging from that. You really see the spirit of something emerging from the body, although we also have the sense of the body emerging from the spirit of something, right? The image, the idea, and no longer needing it to be in that cocoon, but it's actually ready to take flight. It's actually ready to enter reality in this new way that is very different than the way that entered the cocoon, very different in the way that we've moved before. It almost has like North Node, South Node work to me, that transition that we make of, this is the way I've always done things, and now this is the new way I'm going to move through life, right? We drove to the airport, and now we're getting on an airplane, and we're switching up how we're still transporting. We're still moving forward, but we're switching up our mode of transportation. The muse, we also have this sense of, that she has a moth here, but the sense of having to break free from this cocoon state, the sense of birth into something free, and the sense of letting go of something that's no longer useful for you, like the original vision, the original plan of how this was going to go, the original vision you had in your mind of like, okay, you know what, I'm done with that. Like if you're writing a paper and you finally throw away your first couple of versions of the paper or the story, because where you've gotten this thing really has legs, and this thing can really move, and you've let go of maybe some story elements, maybe some characters, so that you could deepen and develop other characters, and now we can fly, now we can move. But this is a sense of that emerging from some sort of, and you get a sense of some sort of stickiness. It's not just easy to break out of the cocoon. It's not just like cut and dry, sliced, here we go, it's open and now I'm free. There's a sense of having to wiggle your way out of that, having to get out of that past, get out of the extremely important formative past. We're not discarding it as if it wasn't important, just like you don't discard your mother simply because you're no longer living inside her body. You don't just discard her and throw her out to the trash, do you? You don't do that. Tell me you don't do that. Although people do, right? I don't need that old hag anymore, but this is very respectful. I feel like of this cocoon, of this past thing, we're being very respectful of it. It brought us here, and now it's time to change and transition. Struggling out of the old, sloughing off the old so that we can be reborn. Oh yeah, the burial and the planting look the same, right? And so we can look like we're burying a seed, and that just kind of randomly came up here, but we can look like we're burying a seed, but we're actually planting it. So that's what death is that burial that's actually a planting. It's something for the future. It's going to change. And then we have just this transformation, just straight up telling us this is what this card is, actually. We're just going to let go of the big scary fears of death, although it is instructive for letting us know how sometimes we approach our transitions in life. We're scared of them, but it's all in service of life. So having that holistic view of death, that it's all part of this whole in service of life, that's very important, I think, with dealing with the death card. So reverse, we're talking about fear of change, inertia, lethargy, not wanting to change, not wanting to get up and get moving, maybe a rigidity, a refusal to accept reality that these changes are coming in. It does often look like the devil card, being so addicted, refusing to change, ego, self-definition coming in there, and inflexibility, some sort of inflexibility. Clinging to the status quo, dragging out an ending, especially when we've got like this, if we were to get this, dragging out an ending. It can also be very much focused on the ending rather than new beginning. Focus on what's being lost, the cocoon, the caterpillar, versus what's emerging, the butterfly. So similar cards, the Tower, which we're heading up to, but that tends to be a little bit more external, referencing something external. Changing in your wands, and 10 of Wands would also be a similar card in the Lesser Arcana, because it's an energetic ending to something. We're done with how something's been perceived or the feeling of something, and we're ready for a different life. But it's referencing those final moments, as with the Death card, those final moments with the energy of something or the dream of something. But it's so much easier if we understand that this is all in the service of a better life, and this was all meant to happen, a rite of passage that we were always meant to go through. So a little bit long, but it's the Death card. It's card number 13, right in the middle there. Not right in the middle, but you know, it's a pretty huge transition in how something emerges. So a little bit of a longer chat here. Hope it was helpful. Thank you for joining me for these.